Cancer is scary, and it's also expensive. In fact, it's the number one cost concern among big employers. But while cancer treatments have improved and death rates have dropped, disparities in outcomes have widened. A key driver is access to comprehensive cancer centers. Access Hope, a spinoff of leading cancer center City of Hope, is democratizing cancer care by widening access to first-rate resources. Hi, everyone. I'm David Williams, president of strategy consulting firm Health Business Group and host of the HealthBiz podcast, a weekly show where I interview top healthcare leaders about their lives and careers. My guest today is Mark Stadler, CEO of Access Hope. If you like this show, please leave a review and subscribe. Mark, welcome to the HealthBiz podcast.
Thanks, David. Nice to be here. Appreciate it.
Let's talk a little bit, wind the clock back a little bit, talk about your background, your upbringing. What was your childhood like? Any childhood influences that have stuck with you throughout your career?
Oh, my childhood was idyllic. I grew up in Redondo Beach, California. I'm the sixth of 8 children. I have 5 older brothers and 2 younger sisters, and we spent a lot of our time back in those days. California was, much slower, much quieter. We spent our days on the beach and up in the local mountains and in the deserts. It was really quite an idyllic life. Redondo Beach is the home of the Beach Boys, so it was really something to grow up there.
That about spells it out. Now, were your parents looking for a daughter at some point? Like, were you a disappointment in that sense, or they continued on? I mean, they didn't give up, that's for sure.
Well, they saved the best for last in terms of the boys, and I remind my older brothers of that. I have a very unusual family in that my oldest brother is 23 years older than I am, and my youngest sister is 9 years younger than I am, and it's the same parents.
Nice.
So you can do the math. And they stayed together for a long time. But yes, they were consistently and constantly trying for that girl, and she came along a year after me. And
that's good.
Yeah. So they got their wish there. So they were great people. My dad was an entrepreneur and owned his own trucking company, and always wanted all the boys to work there. And I was the first one that said, I want to go to college, and went off to college and went and did my own thing. My brothers all went to work for the family business. So
that sounds good. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic with the larger family. Sometimes people say, it's like great for the kids and tough for the parents. And I talk to, we have 4, and I talk to people sometimes who, they come from a big family and then they have a small one themselves, or sometimes it's the other way around. I haven't had so many that it's like consistent from one generation to the next. So yeah, I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I have 4 children of my own. My mother told me as the 4th one was coming, she said, don't try to compete with me. And I said, Mom, that's not what it's all about. But today we have 4 children and 10 grandchildren.
Fantastic.
So I love big families. They're a lot of fun.
Now, what did you do in terms of education when you went off to school? What was the path, and what was that like? And it sounds like you didn't have that many. You were the trailblazer.
I went to Loyola University of Los Angeles. Sometimes it says Loyola Marymount because that's the only thing left on the drop downs. But yeah, I was the last graduating class of Loyola University when it was Loyola University and Marymount College. Loved the experience. It was a really great transformational experience for me to be at Loyola. And I went into the group health insurance business right out of school, which was a new area, really, and certainly self-insuring insurance for large employers. So it was just it was eye-opening and life-changing for me to enter this industry.
Very interesting. Yeah, I saw the stints with Great West and Allstate, and then before moving along to Mercer as well.
Yeah, I actually started with Great West right out of college and returned to them 20 years later. And in between, spent some time at Allstate and then about 17 years at Mercer, which was also life-changing and really working with very prominent employers and working with some of the brightest people in the industry. It was a wonderful experience.
Tell me about HealthSmart. What was that about?
HealthSmart was a company that was doing a roll-up of independent third-party administration businesses. Today, HealthSmart is a part of United Healthcare. Actually, they were recently acquired and rolled up into the UMR division of United Healthcare. I've always liked businesses that were either, you had to turn them around, you had to grow them, you had to figure out how to do new things with them, and HealthSmart very definitely fell within that bailiwick, if you will, of really trying to transform the self-funded business for mid-sized employers.
Got it. And how about Bridge Health?
Bridge Health was a company that was involved, it still is, it's now a part of Transcarent, but Bridge Health was a company that was involved with guiding people into high quality surgical solutions when they had a choice. So these were all scheduled surgeries. That was a company that to a certain extent needed a little bit of a turnaround and repositioning to get it to its growth stage and moving along. And ultimately, as I said, it is now a part of Transcarent. So.
It's an interesting area because people talk about sometimes, we need consumer-driven care, and you hear about that. And then within healthcare, there are a limited number, but there are still a number of places where you really can make that choice. You've got the time, and you actually have a choice. You've got the insurance that can do that, and that's where it's helpful. Sometimes people, right. I feel, get a little ideological about how you need to make it more of a consumer business. It just depends. Right. It can't be completely a consumer business. So it sounds like Bridge Health focused on the areas where it could be more so.
It did. And, a large portion of our population are in rural or secondary markets where you might not have the highest quality of surgical solutions, or you have really good solutions, but better options are available. And Bridge Health made those things, for example, for people who lived in Alaska, bringing them down into the lower 48. Sometimes it was also an issue of both cost and quality, that you could get the surgery done at a much more appropriate cost, and the employers made it worth the employees' while to go down into the lower 48 to have those surgeries done. That's just one example.
It's nice when you can have it's not a trade-off between cost and quality, but you can actually improve both. So it sounds worthwhile.
Exactly. Yes, it was. It was.
So it sounds like great background to set you up for Access Hope and all the things that you're doing there. We were corresponding before this podcast, and you were pointing out that cancer care is number one on the cost concerns for employers, and that's despite the fact that it's not as though we hear about maybe different pockets and new things happening with cancer, but generally speaking, it's not as though that there's been a surge just in the number of cancers. Why is this on the top of employers' lists of cost concerns?
Well, so oncology services today do consume on average about 12% of an employer's healthcare budget. We see some customers they're in the 20% range. Depends on the demographics of their group, could be also the industry in which they're in. There are some industries that have higher incidence of cancer, like the airline industry and things like that, where people have greater exposure. So there's a couple things going on. One, there is a higher incidence and it's growing rapidly. And there are emerging subspecialties of cancer that are driving significant costs because they are new cancers that are being discovered today. When you look at cancers, about 1% of our population will get a new cancer diagnosis in a year. About 20% of that population will get a cancer, of that 1%, will get a diagnosis that's going to drive about 80% of total cancer costs within an employer's sponsored health plan.
Now, you mentioned, Mark, that is going to vary by employer. You've got your average amount, but then you've got some higher ones. And does it have to do with the demographics of the employees, or is it actually something about the work environment as well? I wasn't sure what you were getting at with the airline example.
Some of it can be environmental. So, for example, you just look at the airline industry. You have people working outdoors on ramps. They have high sun exposure. You have people that are working in aircraft that has higher radioactive exposure and other things. And so we do tend to see some higher incidence of cancer in those work groups. You look at fire departments and other things like that because of exposure to certain elements, you may see higher incidence of cancer. Regional differences in the incidence of cancer as well. the other thing that's driving this is a lot of the cost changes in cancer is medical knowledge. In the past, it used to change about every 3 to 5 years. You'd get some new advancements in particularly in the oncology area. Today, there are new advancements, every 50 to 70 days in certain areas of cancer. New treatments are found because of what we've learned through molecular and DNA testing and the advancements in science today. So it's changing the pathway, and those pathways are all leading to a cure that is driving a lot of this as well. So,
got it. And you're sort of anticipating my next question in a way, because one reason the cost could be rising is that there's more you can do with the cancer now. So it's become more treatable. And I would say, in the same way, if I'm going to spend more, but maybe I'm going to get something more for it, like a cure or long-term remission,
right.
That would be great. And maybe this is related, but there's these socioeconomic disparities and outcomes seem to be rising. And I'm just going to guess that has to do with, if you've got something that's changing rapidly, then those that can keep up with the change are going to do well. And there's going to be a separation of those folks from those that, are going, let's say, to physicians that are still practicing whatever they learned in medical school, or the last time they had a chance to go to a CME.
Yeah, there's a distinction in how cancer is being cared for across the country. There are 50 or so what are called NCI level cancer centers in the country. These NCI designated centers and academic centers are where about 90% of the research is happening around new and emerging cancers, new treatments, how to give more precise diagnosis of a cancer, which is really important to get that precise diagnosis early in the cancer journey. Your opportunity for survival is much greater. That's all happening in these NCI centers. And as I said, about 90% of the research is done there, but only about 20% of the care is actually delivered through these big NCI centers. 80 to 85% of care is delivered in community-based oncology centers, where those doctors, as you just said, they're very experienced oncologists, but they may see some of these rare cancers or these new and emerging cancers once or twice a year, or even in a career. They also may not be able to keep up on the changes in treatment protocol of what is appropriate treatment for cancers today, because they just can't keep up with all of the new and emerging research. And so it's really important to be able to deliver that type of information to them so they can appropriately treat the patient, get them diagnosed correctly, and to avoid what we call misadventures in cancer. And when you do that, you're also pulling waste out of the system. An incorrect diagnosis leads to incorrect treatment, which means you then have to restart, and all of that was for naught. And it's very expensive, not to mention the humanistic impact of that on the person who's going through the journey, and the disappointment of knowing that they have to change treatment protocol and essentially restart.
A lot of times I hear arguments from an academic medical center. I'm going beyond cancer now and thinking more broadly, that this is where the research is done. We have the most advanced sort of approach, and then yet the community hospitals will say, well, it's more convenient, and also the outcomes might be better because we're not dealing with having to teach people. We're more focused, and particularly I'm thinking about something like something maybe a little more routine like colonoscopy or other sort of procedure people may do as well or better, and it's less expensive. Now, how do you think about? You've given me a good reason why a comprehensive cancer center could be less expensive, which is if you do the right thing first, you don't have to repeat it and do something else. But are there measurable differences in outcomes compared with average care at a comprehensive cancer center? How should we think about that?
Yeah, and so recent studies would indicate that the outcomes are 20% better if you're in an NCI or one of these large research centers, having your care delivered. And what we've tried to do at Access Hope, and what we are doing, is delivering that knowledge from that NCI center out to the community-based oncologist. not putting the patient in the middle where they have to negotiate with their local doctor, but where we bring that directly to their local doctor in a peer-to-peer consultation with them to accurately diagnose and get the person on the right path the first time. So essentially delivering that level of expertise, the appropriate level of expertise, to where it's needed most and when it's needed most. Many cancer patients can't travel. And that's one of the challenges that they have in getting to one of these NCI centers. It could be geographically too far away, or their immune system could be compromised in such a way that they can't travel, or the diagnosis is stage 3 or stage 4, and time is of the essence to get the diagnosis done quickly. So by exporting it, you're solving for a lot of those problems that are part of the geographical disparity in cancer care, and you narrow that gap.
So on a pragmatic basis, is this done, one patient at a time, or is it sort of a systemic approach where you would work, with a given regional center? Like how does it come? Like, let's say if I were in a place that I don't have access, but I know I want to be able to get this level, and I go to do I just have to pick the right regional one, or when I get there, you could work with my physician there, my oncologist?
What we do is we work through large employers who are sponsoring health plans, who are looking at the disparity in care and that's happening in their population. And they've said, we want to make sure that when it comes to cancer, that our people are getting the very best that's possible. And we identify patients through that employer and reach out to their doctor directly on their behalf and on behalf of the employer's plan. And it's a revolutionary approach. It's not something that when I say member, it's a patient, that somebody who's in this health plan has to opt in to do. They can if they would like to, but we're proactively reaching out and identifying situations and reaching out on their behalf to their doctor to assist them, and keeping the doctor in complete control of the case. 88% of the time when we're communicating with a doctor, they're adopting our recommendations. The 12% that might not, it might be because it's too late stage. There was nothing else that could be done, but we know that we're making significant impact. And the response we get from the local oncologist is, "Thank you. How can I get this for all of my patients?"
Got it.
Because they are all, one of the unique things and wonderful thing about oncologists, they're on a mission for a cure. They want to get that patient through. That's their goal. There's no profit in the end of a life. And they're really looking for the value that they can deliver in getting that person through their cancer journey successfully. And so are the employers. The employers also know that the right treatment might be more expensive, but it's the right treatment. And if you get it done quickly and you avoid that misadventure I was talking about, it actually pays for itself. And so cost is not the driver of this. It's really quality that employers are looking for, that the employers that are hiring us. The other thing that they're trying to look at, and that when we reach out to people, we do that without knowledge of their socioeconomic, their racial position, anything. And we are helping to deliver an employer's what they call their DE&I strategies, their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, to make sure that there is health equity across their plan. And we see time and time again where we're reaching into underserved zip codes around the United States, and your zip code does have a strong correlation to your success on a cancer journey. So when we can reach to that doctor in Tupelo, Mississippi, or Hays, Kansas, that are way far out away from these centers, and bring NCI level care to a patient in that community, it's life-changing. It really is life-changing. And it's very motivating. It's what motivates our team.
So I've heard about some second opinion services that also serve the employer market. A lot of the diagnoses probably are cancer, but they're not as focused as you are. I heard one element where you're saying maybe oncologists are particularly, you don't have an issue of just stay out of my lane. They're interested, maybe more interested than let's just say orthopedist or cardiologist. And is that the case? How would you contrast yourself with there's that element of it, but are you different? Like, is second opinion, is that the wrong way to think about it?
Well, second opinion, I would certainly encourage anybody to always get a second opinion on any type of medical care, because there are multiple ways to look at a diagnosis or a treatment plan, and it's your health. But when it comes to cancer, what you don't want to have happen is I call it the monkey in the middle. You don't want to give a second opinion to the patient and leave them alone to go talk to their doctor. And you also don't want to create mistrust with the patient of the person that they're putting their life in the hands of a local oncologist. And to put a precision review with a true NCI specialist, these are the doctors that might actually be working on the clinical trials and looking at the emerging capabilities and treatment protocols for that specific subspecialty of cancer, and putting them in touch with that local oncologist. It empowers the oncologist, and the oncologist is not in a position where they're losing their patient, which they don't want to do. And they want to be able to treat that patient and appropriately treat them. And we're giving them everything they need to do. Sometimes a second opinion it's a second opinion, and it ends up in a file somewhere that no one really addresses. And we wanted to make sure that what we were doing was really adding value and changing the course of treatment and the outcome for people who are on a cancer journey.
I sometimes hear about it related to managed care, or even, let's say, Medicare Advantage, that you have a certain percentage of your panel, if you're a physician, that has a certain way that you're treating them because of, maybe in that case, your financial requirements, and then it changes your whole practice. Do you see an impact on, you had mentioned that local oncologists may say, hey, I wish you could have this for all the patients, but is there some sort of a broader effect that you have, even if you're not obviously getting the whole panel of the patients? Does that oncologist get better, the local oncologist? Do they practice differently?
I think they do. I think they also establish relationships with the NCI Center to be able to connect with them on future cases and other things like that. I think it's very empowering to them. Yes. One of the things that also can happen in some of these other, you mentioned Medicare Advantage and other situations. Some people are enrolled in plans that have very narrow networks. They have fewer options. An NCI center, chances are not in one of those options. And so they are relying exclusively on the opinions and the treatment protocols that are developed by that network to be able to offer an NCI guideline for folks in those. It can be, again, life-changing.
Got it. So sounds like you're making good progress, and I'm curious, where do you go from here? Is it just kind of getting the word out to more employers and building what you're doing? What's on your roadmap?
Yeah, so today we're working with more than 35 of the Fortune 500 companies in the country have contracted with us, and we're very flattered by that. We're continuing to work with other large self-insured employers. We're also now working through large health plans where they are offering our services to their customers as part of a cancer offering. So that's a big movement for us. We're working with union welfare plans where there are labor negotiated benefits. They have a real keen interest in improving cancer care for their members. And then we're also just now entering the Medicare Advantage market with a pilot next year to see what we can do in impacting the lives for people on Medicare Advantage. The incidence of cancer in a Medicare population because of age is about double what it is for an under 65 population. And our mission is to deliver this life-changing information out to oncologists. And we're also to perpetuate the original mission of City of Hope, who founded us, which is to democratize cancer care.
Makes sense. I think that long-term, you'd have to be working with the older popportion, considering that's where most of the cancer actually is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So last
Exactly.
question, the last question I have for you, Mark, is about sort of turning back to whether there's, any good books that you've read lately, anything that you might recommend.
Well, I'm reading two books. One I'm reading for the second time. It's called The Empire of the Summer Moon because the movie's coming out, and that's not a commercial for the movie, but it's a fascinating story of the life of a major Indian tribe in Oklahoma, and it's, I think, something we can all learn from. And I'm also reading a really great book. It's called The American Nations: A History of 11 Rival Regional Cultures of North America.
Wow.
And when you read it, it really helps you understand why the left coast is different than the East Coast. And many of that still survives today. There's cultural norms in parts of, and I grew up in Redondo Beach. Today I live in Dallas, Texas, which is, a very interesting cultural shift for me. But it really helps you understand why some regional areas of the country are different. So it's a fascinating book.
That sounds really good. Well, Mark
Yeah.
Stadler, CEO of Access Hope, thank you for joining me today on the HealthBiz podcast.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate being here.
You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.